Welcome to Everyday Economics, the podcast that helps you learn about the economic world happening around you every day. I'm your host, Krug, president of the 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan Franklin News Foundation. Everyday Economics, the production of America's Talking Network. You can hear all of our great podcasts at americastalking.com. To support Everyday Economics, please make your tax-deductible charitable contribution by clicking the link in the show description. We are recording today's episode on Friday, September 15th. And joining me as always, my friend and colleague, Dr. Orphe Divounguy, PhD economist. Dr. O, we're going to get right down Main Street for you, talking about what's going on with mortgage demand. Stories that have come out, over the last week, detailing the fact that mortgage applications are down substantially, 27% lower than they were at this time a year ago. And then it's just certainly the reality of interest rates and buyers facing monthly costs carrying this higher interest rate that's costing them anywhere from hundreds of dollars a month to in excess of $1,000 a month, simply because of the way that it works. I mean, a 2.5% mortgage versus a 7.5% mortgage, pretty substantial. But you're seeing a little bit of a would you say a light in the tunnel here?
So you're absolutely right. Mortgage demand has fallen because mortgage rates are really, really high, right? But I guess the optimism for me comes from the fact that with builders building so much, we're finally going to see inventory climb to close the gap with demand, right? So you had demand exceeding supply. Demand is finally slowing down a little bit due to, one, the higher mortgage rates, but also due to, most importantly, maybe even more than mortgage rates, the fact that demand typically slows this time of the year. So you have these two factors that are bringing demand down. And yet you have millennials aging into home buying. So you have a lot of people who still want to own a home. You have population growth from abroad that's also going to add to the number of families in the US. And so that's a lot of people who want to get into their own home. And they're just kind of like, okay, this is not the time to buy because it's the summer and people don't typically buy in the summer. And on top of that, mortgage rates are really high. So maybe, some people just can't qualify. And so they're put to the sidelines. But then you have builders that were building, right, roughly 1.6 million units between housing starts and units under construction. And so all of that coming on the market in 2023 just means that basically inventory, which by the way, inventory was below last year's level and roughly 43% below 2019's level, right, before the pandemic. And so that increase in inventory, right, is going to ease price pressures somewhat and allow those people that were kind of like right there on the line waiting to finally gain access to some of that inventory and maybe potentially move. It also means builders will probably be raising the incentives, right? And when you look at builders and the types of incentives they're offering, right? Rate buy downs, all that stuff, right? You're having people come into their home 2 points below current mortgage rates. And so that's also going to allow some of that demand that's right there on the line waiting for something to happen, right? To finally be able to move into a home. So that's why I'm optimistic, despite the large decline in mortgage demand that we're seeing right now.
So I have a number of searches going on and around the country. I mean, I'm just trying to follow along, and I've got a couple of different thoughts on real estate for the year ahead. Looking in certain markets, and literally, I mean, it's a pretty insane pattern search for me. I'm looking at things in Florida. I'm looking at things in the Carolinas. I'm looking at things in Colorado, but I'm also looking at things in Pennsylvania. And I'm still paying attention to what's going on around me in suburban Illinois. One of the things that I've noticed anecdotally in all markets, with the exception of a few, Colorado seems to be really still moving very, very quickly. I mean, just anecdotally, based on the searches in the towns where I'm looking, which are all, basically in greater Denver. Florida, in like the Fort Myers, Naples area. I've seen a little bit of reduction in pricing. But for the most part, things that look like they're worth buying are being sold. In other places, not to say that there's a slowdown, but the incentives and I'm talking about existing home sales. They're starting to see language in real estate listings where the sellers are willing to make a concession to the buyers in print, the listing itself, to buy down rates.
Pay for some of the closing costs,
or to pay for some percentage, an additional percentage of closing costs, right? So, I mean, is this just what competition looks like in this market with interest rates being what they are?
Exactly. I mean, with interest rates being what they are, that's right. I mean, you have to meet the buyer where he's at. You have a ton of people who want to buy, but they're facing this budget constraint, right? And they have this monthly cost that they need to be able to get into, and so sellers in this environment, who, by the way, if you're an existing homeowner, you're sitting on record home equity, you can pay $10,000. You can lower your price, but some people choose not to lower the price. They'll take the higher price, but right, I'll buy the 2 points for the first two or 3 years. I'll pay the extra $10,000 to make it happen, right? Very few existing homeowners are doing that. I think that's still, they're not quite there yet, but builders are definitely doing it. Builders are, they're saying, hey, I don't want to sell for less than this price here. And since the buyer only really cares about the monthly payment, maybe I can get them, at a lower rate for 3 or 4 years, the first 5 years, maybe even. And I'll throw in an extra $10,000 at closing, to sweeten the deal. And that's exactly what, normally that's what we saw, especially when the market was really, really cold at the end of last year in 2022. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit of what we saw this year, and it worked really well for builders. I mean, they took away some of the incentives because demand was so strong in the spring. But it's still, there's still some incentives are still out there, and it worked great for builders because the share of home sales that went to builders was absolutely ridiculous this year, compared, maybe threefold what it normally is in 2023. And I think builders are going to bring them back to keep the market moving in a time where the market's kind of slow, right? The fall, the winter, the fall, the early winter up to December, things are slow. They're still building. They got homes that are, they have lots. The homes are on lots that haven't even been quite started yet. Like they're just breaking ground. They're just getting started. And so you have all these homes that are coming, and builders can't, by the way, builders can't just say, oh, I'll just wait till next year when demand picks up. They're facing, builders are also having to borrow. They're facing higher financing costs. They have payments to make. They have obligations. They have to build. What else are they going to do? Right?
No, I mean, that's what builders do. They build houses. And and if they're not building and they're not selling, then they're not working.
And so they're going to keep things moving. And I think that's great news for buyers, which is why I say to buyers right now, right now might actually not be a bad time. People are looking at the fact that mortgage demand cooled means that there's less competition on the market.
Yeah, that's true.
All right. For buyers, at the same time, supply is continuing to increase. So if you turn your eyes to new construction, you might be able to get a good deal right now. And so, so that's kind of my advice for buyers. Keep your eyes out there. Go use the platforms, use the technology. Zillow makes it easy. We even have this search by monthly cost calculator. Just keep looking. Talk to an agent. Make sure you're pre-approved, right? Not just pre-qualified.
Well, that letter matters, right?
That's right. Get ready. Make sure your finances are in order. You're ready to go, and so that when you find that deal, because builders are building. And you can see the descriptions, $10,000 rate buy downs, and so they're waiting. They're just waiting. And so if you got that pre-approval letter, or if you got some cash on hand, you're ready to go, because it's not going to get any easier in the spring. What's happening is the balance between supply and demand is coming back in line. On aggregate, right, for the U.S. economy. And that means yields are going up. Mortgage rates are not about to come down anytime soon. So that's the reality of the soft landing. Recession risk receding. Labor market still on pretty solid ground. The U.S. economy growth prospects looking better. What does that mean? Well, it means that yields are going up. And with yields going up, mortgage rates are going to remain elevated. So sitting around when you can afford it and you really want to move and you found the right house, sitting around and waiting is not going to work for you. You know, the best thing you could do is get in, build some home equity, refi later if the U.S. economy gets in trouble. That's my advice to people in the housing market today who are looking at these rates and saying, oh my goodness, they're so high, you know. And maybe a last thing to say here is that, look, this is the norm. This is the norm. Rates at 7%.
That might be a bitter pill for some people to take, but really, this is in line with where I was and what I had to pay 25 years ago when I first got into the housing market. And I mean, if this is it, and everybody that bought in the last, I guess it'd be really like 8 to 10 years. If you got a break, you got a break. If you didn't get a break, you had an opportunity to refi. If you're just coming into the market now, I think that this is about as good as it. If this is as good as it's going to be, then this is as good as it's going to be. I mean, I think the idea of waiting around for it to change before you would make a move, if you really want to get into it, I think you're kidding yourself, because the markets just don't move like that.
If you're in an affordable market, good for you. Good for you. If you're not in a necessarily affordable market today, guess what? You might get some appreciation, going forward. It might be a little slow right now because, supply's coming on. So you might not see a ton of appreciation right now. But ultimately, you got a lot of people waiting to buy a home still. And you got to love the home you live in, right? So
right on.
You don't go and buy a home unless you're going to love it. So, I say if you haven't found the home you love, sit out, wait. But ultimately, if you found the home you love, go for it, refi later if you get the opportunity. The happiest people in America today are these homeowners that built some home equity, refi during the pandemic, and their mortgage payments are super low, and they made a ton of money, and they're super wealthy now because they had made the decision to buy a house a few years before the pandemic, basically. So best advice for people right now in looking to buy, if you find that home that you absolutely love, take the plunge, because things are just not going to get any better in terms of mortgage rates.
For Orphe Divounguy, this has been Chris Krug. Subscribe to Everyday Economics and other quality podcasts at americastalking.com.